All right, back everyone. Week 2 of working into this little drone thing. I'm going to keep modeling up some details this week. Still got a fair way to go in terms of getting all the body work working. Got some very simple materials on there at the moment, which will just kind of help to break up the forms a little bit more, but just there as a bit of reference for now. So yeah, mostly just modeling stuff today, I think. Work on the engine a little bit more, get some detail into that. A few other little main details on the body that I want to put in there. Some from the sketch and others that are just things I'm going to add on because I want to. Yeah, and we'll see where we go. So, got any questions about the process as we go along? Just drop them in the chat. Otherwise, I'll talk through what I'm doing when it's something I think needs explaining, and yeah, just model some stuff up. Start with these tail bits, I think. Interesting. Put that in there for now. Getting a little bit slow actually for some reason with these booleans, but pushing through and see, make sure that it's not. Should be okay. And this kind of stuff tends to be pretty destructive in terms of modeling. It creates a lot of hard to work with shapes a lot of the time, but for something like this, which is going to be a fairly static concept mesh, it doesn't bother me too much. Sometimes I'll go through and apply, for instance, like these subdivision surfaces and stuff like that if I need to muck around with the shape a little bit more, but most of the time I treat it a little bit like a sculpt, I guess, where there's definitely going to be some messy stuff in here, but you can overlook it, you can clean it up if it gets really bad, but it doesn't need to be anything that takes up too much attention or time. like this, just a piece that needs to sit somewhere inside that gap. It doesn't need to be perfectly centered. There are other ways to make this kind of intersecting geometry. It's a little bit easier when it's not a subdivision surface, but this should be totally fine for the kind of thing we're wanting to do. Graphic mode and just make a few little hang-on cuts here. That's not what. Yeah. Whoops, hopefully we haven't crashed it 2 minutes in. Completely misused that tool then. I did the wrong thing and maybe broke it. Luckily we haven't done much, so it may actually be quicker just to kill this and move on instead of waiting for it to figure itself out. Let's just do that. Whoops. All right, let's try that again. Maybe we'll just apply modifiers on here. Speed that up. Reapply the mirror. Easy enough. Obviously we get this very kind of messy mesh, but it's all right. We can still cut into it and cut out of it, but it should run a little bit faster if it's not trying to down a little bit. Actually, let's do that as a. We don't have the subdivision surface. We can do this as a slice mesh, and that should work a little better. So just putting a really small bevel on this too, which is always a good idea for hard surface stuff. This is where meshes will tend to start to break. So we'll, for instance, get stuff like this, which I'll just clean up now so that people kind of understand how that works, but just basically just merging these together. Generally fix that kind of stuff. In this particular case, perhaps we've created a really bad one, but obviously got horrendous topology, but might be able to just like that. We'll fix it for now. We'll look at, but does the job. So that's something I'm always on the lookout for the most part. A little weird vertice is not going to affect anything. We'll come to that edge, but sometimes you'll get stuff like this that is truly horrendous. Just have to deal with it. I must have had a weird sharp going on there. I am going to cut that out. I don't want to deal with that. Pretend that never happened. That's fine. Does the job. Still looks okay. So I'll just carry on adding some details. Probably actually just duplicate that. Again, this is kind of thinking of this a little bit more like a sculpting process than a modeling process, because it's really just using booleans and stuff to just get shapes working, and it's not particularly exact or anything like that, but it gets the job done. really small detail in there, but that's kind of the stage we're getting to now, is having to work smaller and smaller details in. And gonna work great. So we'll just do a cut on that. Should look okay. Set that in there. It's totally fine. Occasionally do stuff like this in 3D Coat as well, because it's pretty much just as good at doing this type of hard surface detailing. Obviously using Blender today. I think really anything that allows you to move shapes around relatively easy was totally fine for this kind of stuff. I had ZBrush for this as well, but never really clicked with ZBrush for whatever reason. The hard surface stuff anyway, it's just a bit something that feels a little off about it to me. to build these hydraulics out as well, didn't we? Cool. Up here. Reset the rotation on those. Link the object data so that we can build this where it's standing up, and it will copy across to the other one. There's a couple of commands to flatten planes, siders. That one didn't actually work in the way that I wanted it to. Definitely had one before. It may have been in a different, might have been in a plugin or a different part of HardOps or something that there was a way you could basically average out the normals and it would flatten a non-planar plane like that. But as you saw, I just ended up eyeballing that because it was not something that was worth fussing around with. But you can totally do it. I'll have to look into it because it's one of those things that's super handy when you need it and useless for the rest of the time. So if you can find it, it'll be great. At the moment, I'm basically just copying I've linked the mesh data of these two sets of cylinders. So anything I do here, excluding the booleans until I apply them, is going to show up on there. So this is easier to build as it's sticking out, in plain view than it would be trying to build this underneath the bottom of the actual ship itself. Got a relatively interesting piece here, just not going to play a huge role in anything, but any little piece like this that I make, you just add a few little extra bits to it to make it more interesting than it perhaps might be normally. It helps. Every little bit kind of helps push the design language forward. If you to separate that, the boolean. And then at the end of that, we'll just add a little greeble joint. May or may not use, but we'll add it on there anyway. Weird. Oh, that boolean's not working for us. Try it again. Oh, I know it's going to be because that is can't apply booleans when you're sharing mesh data, I guess, but that's all right. We can just join all this stuff together. We'll apply a quick bevel modifier to this too, which should work okay. Spiky bits up there, but that's all right. And then if we match the mesh data now, should end like that. Awesome. That is facing the wrong way, but that's all right. That around. Just get another another greeble or something in there to wrap the end of that. What genre of sci-fi would this be? Good question. I don't know. I guess it's kind of like it's a little bit. I would call it a little bit kind of like retro Soviet, but I don't know if that's actually like an actual genre. It's one I've made up myself, but it's yeah. I mean, it's I'm trying to make it look a little bit old, a little bit retro. Just because I like that kind of vibe. Add some cables in here. Have something to push a bit of a silhouette out to the side. Hmm. something here that the asset manager that I'm using is actually an add-on. So it's not the it's not the asset library from Blender. There is one now in version 3, an asset browser built in. I don't actually really like the way that it works, the Blender one. So I've just stuck with asset management, which is the plugin that I kind of have used. I also have a bunch of stuff already saved in it, so I've not had the time or the patience to sit down and move all of my assets out of the old one into the new one, because for me the old one works perfectly well. So uh, I think if I was starting fresh, I'd probably just use the one that's in Blender, because it's native to Blender. It's probably going to be supported a little bit better, and it probably runs a bit faster too. But at the moment, it's just not really worth the trouble. But yeah. This kind of cable stuff is really not particularly um, not overly considered. I'm just kind of adding it in where I want to push a little bit more interesting detail into the silhouettes and into the way that it plays with light. Um, can use this same shape here to build a little bit of a, I guess like a, call it, bit of a guide for the ammo belts as they go into here. Maybe just a bit of a hinged guide that we can Yeah, it's the asset management stuff is the thing that I like, and I don't know if this is the same with the new one at all, but the thing that I like about asset management, the add-on, is that it saves out a separate blend file for every asset, which I feel like is a more efficient way of doing it. The new Blender one seems to want you to put everything into one file, which seems silly, especially if something gets corrupted. And I know you can split it up amongst multiple files, but it just is a bit weird to me. And then basically what I do with asset management, which I guess technically you could do with the the Blender default one too, um, is I basically have Google Drive backed up to this machine locally, so it's saving my assets. Basically, any computer I download that onto, it's going to download all my assets. And so basically, this is running off the hard drive, but anytime I update something, anytime I change an asset or add a new one, it's going to basically get immediately synced up to Google Drive, and then any other computer that I have um, is going to also then have that asset on it. So when I open up asset management, all I need to do is install the plugin on whatever version of Blender I'm using, and then just direct it to the same um, Google Drive on the hard drive of the computer. So it's kind of a nice. There's no reason why you couldn't do that on the vanilla one, but it just works really well for that. So basically, as long as I've got a decent internet connection, I can download my my assets wherever I am. I don't. It's so the management of them is actually a lot easier. Yeah, so it's super handy because I keep a lot of my a lot of my work backed up on Google Drive anyway. So I have a pretty big Google Drive, but you can tell it to basically sync only a select folder. So basically, I've got however many terabytes of stuff on Google Drive, but basically just if I'm on a new machine, it's a matter of just downloading the Google Drive app or whatever it's called, sync and backup or whatever they've called it now. And you just sign into it and tell it to download your or to stream your files, and then you can basically just go in and say, "Hey, download this folder," which is my asset folder, and then it basically becomes a local drive on a virtual hard drive that it puts on your computer, and then yeah, you can just tell the you just point the add-on at this new folder, and it's going to be on your computer, so it's super handy. And Google Drive in general is just super handy because it allows you to back up all your work really safely. So I'm a big fan of that. You should always back up your work all the time. That is that is unfortunately the attitude a lot of people take to that kind of stuff. That is, and I've got to say, when it happens, I don't have a huge amount of sympathy for them because, yeah, it's really not that hard to set up a Google Drive, and then it won't happen, and then you're safe. So, um, I I don't really know what plan it is to be honest. It's like I just started on the default one, like whatever the free one is, and then eventually I ran out of space, and I think I've got 2 terabyte one now. I think I'm not sure. It doesn't cost much. I honestly don't even think about it renewing. It just renews. Um, maybe it's like I don't know. Yeah, maybe I'm not sure. However, I think I've got 2 terabytes. Whatever 2 terabytes costs. Um, but I think it's about $100 a year or something. I'm not sure. I remember that being charged at some point, but yeah. But it's like it's I use it to back up work, so it's for clients and stuff like that. So it's for me, it is not $100 a year to make sure that I don't ever lose any commercial work. That's fine. I'm happy to pay that all day. Obviously, if you're a student and you don't have you know limited budget, fair enough. But even the free one, right? Like whatever you get for free these days, I think it's a decent amount of gigabytes. If all you have stored on there is your work, if it's your schoolwork or your personal work or whatever it might be, it's worth it. It's totally worth it to just. I don't like those. I'm gonna get rid of them, and maybe we'll chuck a couple of cables. Steal that. 50, yeah. 50. No, my Google Drive is pretty well organized. Is also another thing that is a good habit to get into is making sure that your file names make sense. You can find stuff when you need to find it. There's nothing more annoying than not being able to find a file. And again, when you're working for people, you've got to keep that stuff organized. This shape really is probably not going to get seen, but I just want to have some sort of cylindrical looking thing go in there to make it look like that joint is relatively well sorted out. And like that's basically what I'm doing here, just checking from back to front to see how it's looking. I'll just jump into rendered mode here as well. Just to have a look, and I like to set up this kind of lighting, this kind of two-directional lighting, essentially to be able to see what's happening, just be able to check all the details and stuff. As long as if you get your viewport a bit smaller, this computer that we stream on is not quite as speedy as one I usually use for making this kind of stuff, so it does render a little bit slow. It's not too bad. Yeah, I just like to add this this kind of lighting because it just bounces the light around nicely. I also have an HDRI in the background here, but I think it's worth looking at your surfaces and the shadows they create under good, like interesting lighting. Because if you part of presenting a design like this is going to be partially lighting as much as like there's a consideration to how you present this nicely, and so you want your make sure that you're building to towards that the right kind of goal. If you just have plain lighting, you may end up looking at something and going, okay, this looks boring, and not realizing that it's because you're presenting it in a uninteresting way rather than the design itself being uninteresting. Right, let's steal that same bit of actually, no, I've got an idea for that. That was a bit of a tough ask to boolean that. Do you still have the bevel? Oh, it's the bevel that's broken. Okay. Apply that boolean. See, that really causes some issues with our bevel, but that's just going to be some of these. Let's get out of the graphic mode. Some of these vertices around here. Well, that's okay. That's gone very. It's gone very wrong. I'll turn that. I don't want to bother about that right now. Tweak it by the angle. We'll leave it off. We'll leave it off for now. That's fine. We can fix that later once we've finished building stuff. One other really interesting thing that little shortcut in Blender that I learnt is that if you have a face selected in orthographic mode, it doesn't always put you in the greatest spot in the scene, but you can actually hit Shift and 7 on the numpad, and it'll actually line your camera view up with that particular face, which is super useful if you want to build kind of orthographically from a face outwards, but don't have, like in this particular case, this face is not oriented in any sort of normal way. It's just on its own crazy normal. So that's a really nice way to be able to build across faces like this, build flat to this face and know that it's all squared up, which is great. Cool. Well, that just crashed. Awesome. Let's see how much work we lost down. Hopefully not too much. Nope. That's pretty good. Okay, good. Save that. Blender does like to crash, but also pretty good at saving itself, so won't complain too much, but we'll just have to start that process again. Yeah, we really didn't lose too much there, so that's fine. So yeah, Shift 7 lines us up. We can just build orthographically like this, knowing that it's all lined up with the same face that we oriented the camera to. Sometimes a little bit awkward to get out of that mode, but it's worth it for the functionality it gives you, I think. peel this hydraulic back. Reset the origin to the middle of that so we can rotate around it, and also just use a custom normal there so we can make sure that it's properly oriented. That's a really nice little feature of heavy poly, is being able to use those custom normal pivots. Super handy. So just save this. I'll explain what that means. I'm just paranoid that it's going to crash. I'm going to keep saving, probably too much. There is a way to do this in regular Blender. I'm not entirely sure how to do it, but basically, by default, you're obviously going to be moving stuff around via just the global X, Y, and Z axes, and any combination of that you want. But for instance, if I've got a face like this one in here, which is obviously facing in a completely different direction, it's not perpendicular with any of the main global pivots. Heavy Poly has a macro that basically lets you to pivot on a custom normal, which basically means that it orients the global Z normal with that particular face. So now if I move something via the Z axis, it just moves it on that normal instead. And then obviously you get all of the representative X and Ys from that same one as well. So it's very handy to be able to control the pivot like that. And then very quickly just pop back to regular global. Well, it's actually still on that, but yeah, regular global ones like that. So it's basically making a custom normal pivot for whenever you need it. You can change it whenever you want. So super handy to be able to do that. So for instance, if I wanted to duplicate, just because I've got this, I wanted to rotate this around its own length there, it's no longer oriented with the Y normal of the actual global thing. And because this is an object with a lot of stuff in it, its object normals are pretty screwed up at the moment. I haven't been, I've been rotating it in edit mode instead of object mode, so it's going to be different. But now if we set the custom normal and then rotate it around the Z axis, it's going to be rolling around its own length essentially, which is really handy. And then if, for instance, I wanted to orient it, kind of like that, move it down a bit, and then I wanted to say duplicate it in the same direction straight down that this cylinder was facing, I could select that face there and probably just complete the circle and then just go pivot custom. And then because I've got my pivot set to custom, if I duplicate that on the Z axis, it's going to use that custom axis, which is the normal of that end of that cylindrical cup. So I can just move that straight down and know that it's moving down exactly parallel with the object itself, as opposed to moving straight down vertically in the world. So just, it basically gives you an extra degree of freedom, which then basically unlocks pretty much everything, if that makes sense. If you're just constrained to X, Y, Z, you have to figure stuff out. But if you get that ability to move stuff on a custom pivot as well, then you can basically move stuff wherever you want, whenever you want, without being confined by what the actual program wants you to do. So it's, yeah, very handy. Oops. Use that orient to this again, just so we can cut some more bad hangons into this. And we use a custom shape that is another one where I could just use the custom normal, move it on the z-axis. Difference boolean there. Actually, let's do that with heavy poly because then it'll. Separate that out to its own piece. Out of the way. And let's see. Just make a set of pipes, tubing to go on the outside here. I'm just snapping this to the face of the planes here. It's very, very simple kind of fake shrink wrap. Just make align that. There we go. So that's, yeah. So that's one of the flatten align tools I use a lot, which works relatively well, which is the one that's built into machine tools, which are free, which is nice. I think it's if you're in orthographic mode, it will automatically average out the face like that. So it does like a nice flatten, but keeps the original angle, which is nice. Pipe on that. Back here. Oops, accidentally deleted it. It's going to get really slow, isn't it? Oh, okay, maybe not. Cut a very shallow panel out of that without going all the way through. Maybe it looks a bit. Put a little greeble in there to set some detail up on that back side. Maybe. No, probably easier to draw that. So just a few little details in here. And again, all this kind of stuff is it's pretty simple stuff, but it's really just there to catch light, you know, and make sure that we've got enough um, yeah, enough kind of like technical detail on the back of these panels to make them feel like they make sense. And so these simple materials, which I did tweak a little bit since last week, but I just put a little bit of texture on them, and they're not definitely not final. We'll redo all the materials before we're done with this for sure. Yeah, it just gives it, you know, a little bit of extra. So from like middle distance, this gives it something to cling on to. Not sure how I feel about that piece in there, but we'll leave it for now. Add a couple more cables in there. Could be fun trying to. I like this feature a lot, which lets me draw cables on surfaces, but it does sometimes get a little bit overcomplicated. It struggles with really bumpy stuff. Delete, like dissolve a lot of these points, but that's all right. I guess it's you could hope it to be. No, we probably do need that one. Yeah, touch that there. Give us a nice little crossover from the back. That'll look good. Cool. Recalculate that point. A couple of clamps, insulation. That broke. Oh. Mirror back on. Have a look at how that's looking. Mirror a bunch of stuff, but that's all right. Oops, one object, so I don't have to deal with them forever as singular objects because that will take forever. Not I need to remake this. Not a fan of that as a piece, but that's all right. Let's do that now, and then we'll move on to another spot. So we are fair warning. Like I said, we're going to spend a fair bit of time modeling on this. In terms of doing this for work, I'd had an approved sketch like that, and that sketch up in the corner here was not a huge amount of time spent. I would probably spend a good day kind of just modeling to get something like this into a nice presentable kind of place. Yeah. Looks funky. Better. Crashed again. So crashy today. That's not ideal. Wasn't even doing anything then. Oh. Dang it. That's annoying. All right, well. For my own sanity, I'm going to not redo that little bit that we lost there because I don't feel like it right now. Let's save this as I'm not sure what would be causing it to crash at the moment. Probably just everyday bugginess in Blender, probably. Could be that it's running off the network storage here at the studio. It sometimes causes things to be a little bit flaky, but whatever. So let's turn that around. Way. Bolts at the other end. Rotate that way, keep some of that angle in there. And we'll sort out a nice little connection point in there. Delete that. Drag that across. Check the silhouette's okay. it is. Let's just switch to orthographic mode and put a quick. Oops. Quick and dirty. A couple of joints that I can use in here. I'm actually missing a few from this particular collection, but that's all right. Bolt, I guess. Probably time to save. Haven't saved in a little bit. Avoid a fourth crash. Got about 25 minutes to go, so we'll just keep smashing through these details, really. A few little details that will, again, catch some light later on. Very easy way of getting cylinder exactly where you want it in terms of its orientation with everything else. Keeps it nice and neat. Work a, let's see, I'm sure we can grab a little greeble from here and use that to build a bit of, probably this guy again. Get a lot of use out of this particular one. That, delete that, delete that. Push it like that. Bite out of it there, and then Nice, that's a quick, easy little detail on the end of that. I feel like it crashes more when that mirror's on, but anyway. Starting to get like a nice level of detail around the back. I keep the profiles relatively thin around here. I don't want it to be too chunky, but there's also something to be said for it being a bit too fiddly as well. You don't really want either of those things, but I think once we connect, I'm just going to save again. Just got that feeling. So let's see. Keep those two around so I know where I'm going. Just isolate those. Try that again. Oops. Oh, that's a weird angle. Ah, Non-manifold edge nearby. Shouldn't be, but okay. Process for a pretty subpar result, but vaguely get what I want. Enough now, at least. Have to now, and maybe inherit it, and then we'll pretend you don't exist. It's interesting. Oh, I know what happened there. Yeah, it's doesn't it? Manually. That way we can just control the angle that that boolean goes through the middle there. Oh, we're going to get some slightly weird stuff around the edge, but actually, I don't need to mirror that there because it's already mirrored through. Awesome. And I will put the old one in there, which is always good for spaces like that on spaceships. Probably just get some cables in here. There. I just want to fill this space in a little bit more without necessarily putting a panel there. Maybe put a cable in, perhaps. Oh, all right. Getting there. Just have a quick little check of just like, oh, these things are the bane of my existence, all these leftover Boolean cutters, which really don't matter, but they annoy me. Spend way too much of my time going around deleting that stuff. All right, let's save this again. Make sure that everything's mirrored that needs to be. There's a couple of things over here. Still need to finish up those connections on the pipe. Cool. So spent most of our time kind of working on the back here, but that is all starting to look pretty nice. So, which is good because it means we can almost done with the back. It's functional enough in there. Still got some floating stuff, obviously, that we just need to connect up with a few little connectors and things like that, but starting to hit some nice shapes. Just wait for this render to come in. The window a bit smaller, so it runs a bit faster. More accurate materials in there. Look at how the values are working as well. Green material, probably same with that one. Okay, the same as that. Yeah, so that's all catching light pretty nicely. Under there. Pretty good. So that should be, back of that's probably pretty much done. There's not too much else I want to do there. So I reckon next week we'll be able to make a similar attack on the front. And once we've done that, we'll be getting pretty close to being able to get all of the materials and stuff finished. Oops, animation data. And yeah, we'll do kind of a, we've probably got, I don't know, maybe two, maybe three more sessions to go. So I may throw some decals on here. I'm not sure how far I'll push the texturing. I may also just do a render and do a bit of Photoshop work over the top. It's better. So yeah, so that's starting to kind of come together. We'll throw some techie bits in there and fill that in because that obviously looks a bit weird, but it's pipes. I would say everything is coming along pretty well. Maybe red. Red's probably a better color, isn't it? Yeah, cool. Working well. So yeah, we'll get this continued on next week. Get the front kind of detailed up a little bit more so it's sitting a little bit nicer with what's going on at the back. Some materials will really help this as well because we can throw some pretty nice kind of edge wear and ambient occlusion and stuff on that, which will just help a lot of these edges pop a little bit more. And then yeah, will be, you know, a few details in the main body in here that can pop out a little bit more. Not super sold on this section in here with the cut. I think I missed the. Just need to move it a bit. I think really. Apply that boolean. Maybe I did. No. This side, right? But yeah, I'm not 100% sold on that, so we'll have a look at that. Move all these around. And I think it's just more of a placement thing more than anything, but we'll have a play with that next week. See if we can get that looking cool. And yeah, so there it is. There's some of the really just quite plain materials in Eevee. Yeah, we'll get some edge wear on there. We'll apply all this and fix up all the bevel stuff that's breaking. Yeah, we should have a decent looking spaceship by the end of it, I think. Yeah, so we will leave it there for this week. And yeah, come back next week at the same time and get a bit more of this done. So I may have just crashed Blender, so that's probably a good place to start. All right, guys. Well, thanks for hanging out. Same time next week, get a bit more done, and we'll get it finished up. All right, see you later.